The company that protected half the world from hackers was just hacked, and the only person who saw how. They called him a diversity hire. They told him to fetch coffee. But when millions vanished from the servers, he found the ghost inside their system and the name of the man who put it there. His boss stole the credit. His company stole his code. But what they didn't know is that he left a trap inside every line they took from him. This isn't a story about hacking a network. It's a story about hacking power. And the moment an invisible man finally made the world see him. To the titans of cybersecurity at Aegis Solutions, Leo Jackson was less than a ghost. He was part of the background noise. A quiet, intensely focused 22-year-old black man in a crisp but ill-fitting suit he'd bought at a discount store. His presence in their high-tech, glass-walled world was a temporary anomaly. He was the summer intern, a role that at Aegis was synonymous with being invisible. His existence was measured in fetching coffee, taking notes in meetings no one expected him to understand, and running menial diagnostic scripts that the senior analysts considered beneath them. They saw the cheap suit, the quiet deference, the eagerness to please, and their minds filled in the rest. A diversity hire, a box ticker, a kid who was lucky to be breathing the same filtered air as the certified geniuses who protected the digital assets of half the Fortune 500. None of them knew that the mind behind those quiet, observant eyes was a prodigy. They didn't know that Leo had been the star of his university's computer science program, a self-taught coder who had been building his own neural networks since he was 16. They didn't know that the only reason he was an intern and not their newest, highest-paid hire was a catastrophic family tragedy. 6 months before graduation, his father had suffered a major stroke, and the ensuing mountain of medical bills had forced Leo to drop out of his final semester to work 2 jobs. This prestigious, unpaid internship being a desperate, long-shot gamble to get his foot back in the door of the world he was born to inhabit. So they ignored him. They held hushed, panicked conversations about the sophisticated cyber attack that was bleeding their most important client dry, speaking in a rapid-fire dialect of zero-day exploits and polymorphic malware, convinced he was deaf to their language. They had no idea he was listening, processing, and connecting the dots they, in their specialized silos, couldn't see. The crisis at Aegis had a name: Hydra. It was a new, terrifyingly elegant piece of ransomware that was systematically crippling their biggest client, a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical giant. Hydra didn't just encrypt files. It was a ghost, a data leech that was slowly, undetectably siphoning off priceless intellectual property, the chemical formulas for next-generation drugs, while simultaneously preparing for a final, catastrophic data wipe. The attack was a work of art, a masterpiece of digital infiltration. And for 2 weeks, it had brought the brilliant minds of Aegis to their knees. At the head of the war room was David Chun, the 38-year-old director of threat analysis. He was a legend in the industry, a man who had built his career on his almost supernatural ability to think like a hacker. But Hydra was different. It was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "It's impossible," he roared, slamming his hand on the conference table, his voice echoing in the tense, sleep-deprived room. "The malware has no signature. It's polymorphic, changing its own code every time we get close to isolating it. It's a ghost in the network, and it's making us look like fools." His team of senior analysts, the best in the business, could only stare at their screens, their faces pale with the grim, exhausting reality of their failure. The client was screaming. The board was demanding answers. And the clock was ticking. As this high-stakes drama unfolded, Leo was performing his assigned, menial task, reviewing terabytes of low-priority network traffic logs, a digital haystack no one else wanted to search through. The senior analysts were focused on the high-level, sophisticated parts of the network, the servers, the firewalls. Leo was sifting through the digital trash. But he wasn't just looking, he was reading. His mind, starved of the complex challenges it craved, instinctively began to search for patterns, for the faint, almost imperceptible whispers of an anomaly. He saw the background noise of millions of routine data packets, the digital heartbeat of a massive corporation. But something was off. A faint, almost imperceptible pattern was hidden in the junk data, the seemingly random pings to external, non-corporate servers. It was a shadow of a signal, a rhythm hidden beneath the chaos. He tucked the anomaly away in a private log file, his heart beginning to pound with a familiar, long-lost excitement. The thrill of the hunt. Later that day, during a team meeting where David Chun was once again berating his team for their lack of progress, Leo saw his chance. "Mr. Chun," he began, his voice quiet but clear, startling the room. "I've been reviewing the low-level traffic logs. I think the exfiltration isn't happening through the main servers. I think it's being hidden in the DNS lookup requests." David Chun turned to him, his expression a mixture of disbelief and utter contempt. "The what? The DNS logs? Leo, that's the digital equivalent of sewer water. It's meaningless noise. You're an intern. You're paid to run scripts, not to have theories. Please, stick to what you know." The dismissal was swift, public, and brutal. The other analysts snickered. Leo felt a hot flush of shame, the casual erasure of his intellect a familiar, painful sting. He retreated to his corner, the laughter of the senior analysts a wall of ice. But the puzzle of Hydra, the beautiful, terrible elegance of it, had awakened something in him. The part of him that saw the world in patterns, in logic, in elegant, hidden truths. He couldn't just let it go. They were looking for a monster breaking down the front door. He knew, with a certainty that was as pure as a mathematical proof, that the monster was already inside, quietly slipping out the back. The public humiliation in the war room was a clarifying moment for Leo. It was a stark, brutal reminder of his place in this world. He was the intern, the charity case, the invisible man. His ideas, without the validation of a title and a diploma, were worthless. He knew then that going through the official channels was a dead end. David Chun, a man whose ego was as formidable as his intellect, would never listen to a theory that contradicted his own, especially not from a subordinate he had already publicly dismissed. Leo had a choice. He could retreat, keep his head down, and finish his internship in quiet, safe obscurity. Or he could continue the hunt on his own, a ghost hunting a ghost in the digital shadows of the network. The choice was never really a choice at all. That night, long after the last of the exhausted analysts had gone home, Leo stayed. He told the night shift security guard he was running some extra diagnostics for Mr. Chun, a lie that was plausible enough to be believed. The war room, once a hive of frantic energy, was now a silent, digital cathedral, the only light the cool, blue glow of the massive data wall. He was alone with the monster. He dove back into the DNS logs, but this time, he wasn't just looking for a pattern. He was looking for a language. The junk data, the pings to random-looking servers, wasn't random at all. It was a conversation. The stolen data wasn't being sent in large, detectable chunks. It was being broken down into microscopic fragments, each one disguised as a simple, innocuous DNS query, a whisper in a hurricane of digital noise. It was brilliant. It was elegant. And it was almost perfect. The queries were being sent to thousands of different servers all over the world, a digital diaspora designed to be untraceable. But Leo, with his deep, intuitive understanding of network architecture, saw the one thing the hackers hadn't counted on: the latency. The time it took for each tiny packet to reach its destination and return a signal. He began to map it, his fingers flying across the keyboard, writing a custom script to visualize the data. He plotted the latency of each packet against its destination. Slowly, a picture began to emerge on his screen. It was not the chaotic spray of a random attack. It was a tight, beautiful, and utterly damning cluster. The thousands of random servers were all decoys. The real data, the stolen drug formulas, was being sent to a single, small cluster of servers, all located in a very specific, very unusual place. A small, private university in Eastern Europe known for its advanced but underfunded computer science program. It was the perfect hiding place, a digital needle in a global haystack. He now had the where, but he needed the who. He knew that an attack of this sophistication wasn't the work of a lone wolf. It was a state-sponsored or corporate espionage operation. He began to dig into the university itself, sifting through public records, academic papers, and faculty lists. And he found him, a visiting professor of cryptography, a man with a brilliant but controversial past, who had been a senior cyber warfare analyst for a rival pharmaceutical giant before retiring into academia. It was all there: the motive, the means, the opportunity. He now held the key to the entire conspiracy. He had the location of the stolen data and the identity of the man who had stolen it. But he also knew that his discovery, as brilliant as it was still just a theory from an intern. He needed to present it in a way that was undeniable. He couldn't just write a report. Chen would take credit for it or, worse, bury it to hide his own team's failure. He had to create a piece of evidence so perfect, so elegant, that it could not be ignored. He spent the rest of the night building his trap. He wrote a new, beautiful piece of code. It was a honeypot, a fake data packet disguised to look like the most valuable piece of intellectual property the pharmaceutical company owned, the formula for their new, revolutionary cancer drug. But embedded within the data, hidden beneath layers of encryption, was a silent, digital tracer, a piece of code that, once it reached its final destination, would activate and send a single, encrypted signal back to a private server Leo controlled. He called the tracer the watermark. The next morning, he walked into the war room, his face a mask of humble, nervous energy. He approached David Chun, holding a USB drive. "Mr. Chun," he began, his voice hesitant. "I know you told me to drop it, but I kept running those diagnostics on the low-level traffic. I think I found a vulnerability, a potential backdoor in the DNS protocol. I wrote a patch that might block it." Chun looked at him, his expression a mixture of annoyance and weary condescension. "A patch? Leo, we are dealing with a polymorphic, state-sponsored piece of malware. You think you solved it with a piece of code you wrote overnight?" But he was desperate. His own team had produced nothing. A long shot from the intern was better than no shot at all. "Fine," he sighed. "Run it. It can't make things any worse." Leo, with the entire team watching, walked to the main console and uploaded his code. They thought he was uploading a shield. He was, in fact, planting a bomb. The honeypot, his beautiful, poison data packet, was released into the network, a single, perfect lie designed to catch a thief. All he had to do now was wait for the monster to take the bait. The atmosphere in the Aegis War room for the next 24 hours was a quiet, tense purgatory. The senior analysts, under David Chin's direction, continued their fruitless, high-level hunt, their efforts now feeling more like a ritual to appease their own pride than a genuine investigation. Leo returned to his corner, a silent, invisible figure, his face a perfect mask of diligent, menial work. But his mind was 1,000 miles away, in a small university in Eastern Europe, waiting for a signal. He had set a timer on his personal phone, a silent countdown that measured the average time it would take for the Hydra algorithm to find, process, and exfiltrate his honeypot data packet. He had calculated it at 14 hours. Every minute that ticked by was a quiet agony. He wrestled with a storm of self-doubt. What if his theory was wrong? What if the DNS anomaly was just noise, and his pattern was a delusion born of his own desperate need to prove himself? What if Chun was right, and he was just an overeager intern in way over his head? If he was wrong, he would not just be a fool. He would be a fraud, the intern who had wasted the company's time on a wild goose chase during its biggest ever crisis. He would be fired, blacklisted, his one, fragile chance at a future in this industry gone forever. He kept his head down, sorting through meaningless logs, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. At the 14-hour mark, nothing happened. An hour passed, then another. The despair that began to creep in was cold and absolute. He had been wrong. It was all a fantasy. He was just a male boy with a hero complex. He was just about to close his private log file, to delete the evidence of his own humiliating failure, when his phone vibrated silently in his pocket. It was a single, encrypted notification from his private server. The watermark had been activated. The bait had been taken. A surge of pure, triumphant adrenaline washed over him, so intense it almost made him gasp. He was right. He had been right all along. He now had the smoking gun, a direct, irrefutable signal from a server in a university in Latvia, confirming that the stolen data was there. But his triumph was short-lived, replaced by a new, colder calculation. He had the proof, but what was his next move? If he took it to Chun now, the man's ego, already bruised by 2 weeks of failure, would be shattered. Chun would almost certainly try to bury the discovery, to find a way to quietly fix the problem and erase the intern's involvement, protecting his own reputation. Leo needed to create a situation where Chun couldn't just take the victory. He would have to publicly acknowledge its source. He waited another hour, then made his move. He didn't go to Chun. He went to Chen's direct superior, a formidable, no-nonsense woman named Catherine Finch, the chief operating officer of Aegis. It was a massive, career-ending gamble, a flagrant breach of the chain of command. He found her in her office, a sterile, minimalist space on the top floor. She was in the middle of a heated phone call, clearly with the CEO of the pharmaceutical company. "I understand your frustration," she was saying, her voice a tight coil of controlled diplomacy. "But I can assure you, Mr. Chun and his team are the best in the world. We are confident we will have a breakthrough shortly." Leo stood in her doorway, a silent, unavoidable presence. She finished her call and looked at him, her eyes cold and impatient. "What is it?" she snapped. "Can't you see I'm in the middle of a crisis?" "That's why I'm here, ma'am," Leo said, his voice surprisingly steady. "Mr. Chun is about to have his breakthrough, and I believe you'll want to be in the war room when it happens." The quiet, absolute certainty in his voice, the sheer, audacious confidence of an intern summoning the SOO to a meeting, was so unexpected that it momentarily disarmed her. "And who are you?" she asked, her gaze narrowing. "I'm the intern, ma'am," Leo replied. "The one who just found your ghost." He led her down to the war room. The atmosphere was still one of grim, exhausted defeat. David Chun was at the whiteboard, frantically diagramming the same, failed theories. "David," Finch's voice cut through the room like a shard of ice. "Your intern tells me you're about to have a breakthrough. I'm here to witness it." Chun spun around, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated fury and confusion as he saw Leo standing beside the COO. He shot Leo a look that could have killed. "Ma'am, I don't know what he's been telling you, but he's been telling me that the exfiltration is happening through the DNS logs," Finch interrupted, her gaze unwavering. "A theory I understand you dismissed yesterday. He also tells me that he has located the destination server cluster in Latvia and has confirmed it with a tracer. Is this true?" Chin was trapped. The COO was standing in his war room, asking him a direct question based on a theory he had publicly ridiculed. To lie would be to risk being exposed as a fool. To tell the truth would be to admit that the intern had just solved a problem that he, the great David Chun, could not. He made his choice. "Yes," he said, the word a bitter pill he was forced to swallow. "We were just corroborating the data. My team has been working on the DNS vector for the last 12 hours. The intern's initial flag was helpful in directing our resources. It was a masterful, slimy piece of corporate spin. He was taking credit, positioning Leo's breakthrough as a minor, helpful tip that had merely confirmed his own team's brilliant work. Leo had expected it. It was part of his plan." "Excellent," Finch said, her voice dripping with an irony that was lost on no one. "Then you have a solution." "We do," Chin said, his confidence returning as he seized control of the narrative. He walked to the main console. "Now that we know the destination, we can simply block the IP addresses of the Latvian servers at the firewall. It will cut off the Hydra's head." He began to type, a triumphant, theatrical flourish to his movements. He was the hero again, the man who had solved the puzzle. But Leo knew something he didn't. The watermark tracer hadn't just sent back a location. It had sent back a second, more important piece of information. "Don't do that, sir," Leo said, his voice quiet but clear. Chun froze, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "And why not, Leo? Are you in charge now?" "No, sir," Leo said. "But the firewall won't work. The Hydra malware has a dead man's switch." The tracer confirmed it. If its connection to the destination server is severed, it will execute its final payload. It will instantly wipe every server in the client's network. Not just encrypt the data, but erase it permanently. If you block that IP, you will be personally responsible for the single most catastrophic data loss in corporate history. The room fell silent. Chun stared at the screen, his face ashen. He had been seconds away from walking directly into the monster's final, devastating trap. He had been so focused on claiming the victory that he had never even considered the possibility of a second, hidden threat. He slowly, deliberately, took his hands off the keyboard. He looked from his screen to Leo, the intern, the invisible man. And in that moment, everyone in the room knew who the real threat analyst was. The silence in the war room was a profound, heavy thing. David Chun stood frozen at the console, the architect of a victory that had been a hair's breadth from becoming a catastrophe. The smug, confident mask had shattered completely, leaving behind the pale, raw face of a man who had just stared into the abyss of his own career-ending failure. He looked at Leo, and in his eyes was a new, terrifying emotion, a grudging, unwilling respect mixed with a deep, venomous resentment. He had been saved, but he had been saved by the one person whose success was a direct indictment of his own. Catherine Finch, the COO, was the first to break the silence. Her voice was cold, precise, and held the sharp, cutting edge of a surgeon's scalpel. "So, to summarize," she said, her gaze sweeping over the stunned analysts before finally settling on Chun. "For 2 weeks, my best and most expensive team has been chasing its own tail. In that time, the intern, whom you publicly ridiculed and dismissed, not only correctly identified the attack vector you ignored, but also identified a catastrophic, secondary threat that your own team was completely blind to. Am I understanding the situation correctly, David?" The question was not a question. It was a verdict. Chun could only nod, his jaw tight, his face a mask of humiliation. "Excellent," Finch said, her voice dripping with ice. She then turned her full attention to Leo. The annoyance was gone, replaced by a look of intense, analytical curiosity. "All right, Mr. Jackson. You have our undivided attention. They have a gun to our client's head. You've told us what we can't do. Now, tell us what we do." All eyes in the room turned to Leo. He was no longer the invisible intern in the corner. He was the commander. He walked to the main data wall, his earlier nervousness gone, replaced by the calm, focused energy of a chess master who sees the entire board. "The Hydra isn't just a piece of malware," he began, his voice clear and confident. "It's a hostage situation. The hackers know we can't cut them off without triggering the dead man's switch. They're arrogant. They think they're in complete control. That's their mistake. That's our opening." He brought up a new screen, a complex diagram of the client's network architecture. "We can't block their connection, so we're going to give them a new one. We're going to perform a man-in-the-middle attack. On ourselves." The senior analyst stared at him, bewildered. A man-in-the-middle attack was a classic hacking technique, a way to intercept data. To use it on their own client was a radical, almost heretical idea. "We are going to build a ghost server, right here, inside our own network," Leo continued, his fingers flying across the keyboard, bringing up lines of code. "We will create a perfect, virtual replica of the Latvian destination server. Then, we will poison our own network's DNS records, redirecting all of the Hydra's outgoing traffic from the real server in Latvia to our ghost server. The malware won't know the difference. It will continue to exfiltrate the stolen data, but instead of sending it to the enemy, it will be sending it directly to us." It was a plan of breathtaking audacity and elegance. It wasn't just a defensive move, it was a trap. It was a way to seize control of the enemy's own weapon. That's brilliant," one of the senior analysts whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and professional jealousy. David Chun said nothing, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. He was witnessing a level of strategic thinking that was light years ahead of his own. For the next 2 hours, the war room was transformed. The atmosphere of defeated despair was replaced by a surge of frantic, purposeful energy. Leo was no longer the intern. He was the director, the conductor of a complex, high-stakes symphony of code. He moved from analyst to analyst, his instructions clear, precise, and logical. He delegated tasks, identified potential problems, and solved them with a speed and fluency that left the senior analysts, the men who had mocked him just a day before, scrambling to keep up. They were no longer his superiors, they were his instruments. Chen watched from the sidelines, a silent, impotent king in his own conquered kingdom. He saw the way his team now looked at Leo, with an unadulterated, professional respect they had only ever shown to him. He was being replaced, in real time, and there was nothing he could do about it. Finally, after 2 hours of intense, focused work, the trap was ready. "Okay," Leo announced, his voice a low, calm hum in the now silent room. "The ghost server is live. The DNS redirect is in place. We are now officially hijacking the hijackers." He hit a final command. On the main screen, a new window opened. And into that window, a stream of data began to flow. It was the stolen drug formulas, the priceless intellectual property of their client, flowing not out into the dark web, but safely back into their own hands. A wave of triumphant, Relieved laughter and applause erupted through the room. They had done it. They had won. But Leo wasn't celebrating. His eyes were still fixed on the screen, his expression one of intense concentration. "It's not over," he said quietly, silencing the room. "We've saved the data. Now, we're going to use their own weapon to destroy them." He brought up another window. It was the code for his original watermark tracer, the honeypot that had started it all. But he began to modify it, his fingers a blur. The Hydra communicates with its command server every 60 seconds, a simple heartbeat to ensure it's still active, he explained. "We are going to use that heartbeat to send a message. We are going to piggyback a new piece of code onto their own communication protocol." He was turning his tracer into a virus, a weapon designed to travel back up the enemy's own secret channel. "When the Hydra pings its home server," he continued, "it will carry this with it. This code will do two things. First, it will find the source of the attack, the real IP address of the hacker, not just the proxy servers. Second, it will deliver a final, irreversible command to the Hydra malware itself." He looked up from his screen, his eyes locking with Catherine Finch's. "It will tell every copy of the Hydra malware on the client's network to activate its own dead man's switch. Simultaneously, the hackers built a self-destruct button to use against us. We are going to press it for them." The sheer, beautiful, and ruthless symmetry of the plan was a work of art. It was not just a defense. It was a counterattack of devastating elegance. He was about to turn the enemy's greatest strength into their own annihilation. The final phase of the operation was a silent, digital execution. Leo, now firmly in command, stood before the main console, a young, unlikely general on the verge of his first great victory. The war room was a study in suspended animation, the only sound the quiet, rhythmic hum of the servers and the frantic, shallow breathing of the assembled analysts. They were all watching the main screen, where two timers were counting down. One was the 60-second countdown to the Hydra's next heartbeat communication. The other was Leo's own, a 10-second timer he had set for the deployment of his countervirus. The plan was to launch his code at the exact, split second that the Hydra opened its communication channel, a digital slipstream that would carry his virus back to its source. "Ready," Leo said, his voice a low, calm hum. The timer hit 10 seconds. He placed his finger over the enter key. The room held its breath. The countdown on the screen reached 0. "Now," Leo whispered, and pressed the key. For a moment, nothing happened. The data stream of the stolen files continued to flow into their ghost server. A nervous murmur went through the room. Had it failed? Had they missed the window? And then it began. A single, red warning light flashed on a server map of the client's network. Then another. Then a dozen more. A cascade of red lights, spreading like a virus. The Hydra malware was dying. Leo's code was working, sending the self-destruct command through the network at the speed of light. Simultaneously, a new window popped up on Leo's screen. It was a single, raw IP address, a string of numbers that was the digital home address of the hacker. "Got him," Leo said, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across his face. He handed the IP address to Catherine Finch. "He's in a university dorm room in Riga, Latvia. That's your ghost." But the victory was not yet complete. David Chun, who had been watching from the sidelines, his face a mask of cold, calculating fury, saw his chance. While everyone was focused on the dying malware, he stepped quietly to a side terminal. He saw the source code for Leo's brilliant countervirus, the watermark, still open on the screen. He saw the genius of it, the elegant, undeniable proof of the intern's superiority. And he saw a way to reclaim his stolen glory. With a few swift keystrokes, he copied the entire code, pasted it into a new, secure email, and sent it to his own private address. He then ran a secure delete script, attempting to wipe the original file and its logs, a clumsy, frantic attempt to erase the evidence of Leo's authorship. He was stealing the weapon that had just won them the war, planning to claim it as his own last-minute, secret creation. But he, like the hackers, had underestimated the intern. Leo had been trained to think like a spy. He had anticipated betrayal. Embedded in his own watermark code was a second, even more secret watermark. A single, elegant line of commented-out code that was, in fact, his own digital signature, time-stamped and encrypted. Any attempt to copy the file would copy the signature. Any attempt to delete the original would create a separate, high-priority log in a hidden sector of the server that only he knew about. He saw the deletion attempt on his own private log file. He saw Chen's betrayal in real time. The quiet, humble intern had not just outthought the hackers. He had outthought his own corrupt boss. The war for the network was over. The war for the truth was about to begin. Catherine Finch was on the phone with the head of the FBI's cybercrime division, relaying the hacker's IP address. The mood in the room was euphoric. They had won. But Leo walked quietly over to Catherine, a new, hard light in his eyes. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and for her ears only. "We have another problem. A different kind of ghost." He showed her his private log on his phone, the time-stamped record of Chen's file copy, and the subsequent, failed deletion attempt. He then showed her the encrypted signature hidden within his own code. The proof was absolute, elegant, and undeniable. Catherine looked from the phone to David Chun, who was now accepting the backslapping congratulations of his colleagues, a perfect, false mask of the victorious commander on his face. The elation on her own face was replaced by a look of cold, profound disgust. The external enemy had been defeated. But the internal one, the one fueled by ego and a casual, corrosive dishonesty, was, in its own way, even more dangerous. She now had a choice. She could bury this, allow Chun to take the credit, and present a unified, heroic narrative to the board and the world. It was the easy choice, the one that would avoid a messy, internal scandal. Or she could do the right thing. She looked at Leo, at his quiet, unshakable integrity, at the young man who had saved her company not once, but twice, in the span of a few hours. "Mr. Chun," her voice cut through the celebration like a shard of glass. The room fell silent. "A word. In my office. Now." She turned to Leo. "You too, Mr. Jackson. I believe you have a final report to deliver." The meeting in Catherine Finch's office was not a conversation. It was a quiet, brutal execution. Chun, still flush with a victory he thought was his, swaggered in, ready to receive his accolades. He stopped short when he saw Leo. The air in the room was cold and still. Catherine did not ask for an explanation. She did not engage in a debate. She simply placed Leo's phone on her desk, displaying the damning log file. "Explain this, David," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. Chun stared at the screen, at the irrefutable, time-stamped proof of his theft and his clumsy, failed attempt to cover it up. The color drained from his face. The confident, arrogant mask shattered, revealing the small, panicked, and deeply dishonest man beneath. He stammered. He tried to lie, to blame a system glitch, to accuse the intern of a setup. But his words were hollow, the desperate flailing of a drowning man. Catherine listened in cold, contemptuous silence. When he was finished, she simply said, "You are a disgrace to this company and to this profession. Pack your desk. Security will escort you out. You are fired." Chin stared at her, then at Leo, his eyes filled with a pure, venomous hatred. He had been outmaneuvered, outthought, and utterly destroyed, not by a rival firm, not by a team of hackers, but by the quiet, invisible intern he had dismissed as a coffee boy. The next morning, an all-hands email went out to the entire company. It announced two things. First, that the Hydra crisis had been successfully averted and the stolen data recovered, thanks to a revolutionary new counterintelligence protocol developed in-house. Second, that David Chun had resigned, effective immediately, to pursue other opportunities. And third, that Leo Jackson, formerly of the intern program, had been appointed as the new, permanent director of a newly created division, the Department of Proactive Threat Analysis. The promotion was a seismic event, a shockwave that ripped through the company's rigid, hierarchical culture. The intern was now a director. The invisible man was now one of the most powerful people in the building. Leo's first act as director was not to move into Chin's old, luxurious office. He requested a new space, adjacent to the main war room, with glass walls and an open-door policy. He then handpicked his team, not from the ranks of the arrogant senior analysts, but from the younger, hungrier minds of the company, the ones who, like him, were accustomed to being overlooked. His second-in-command was the one junior analyst who had, in the beginning, shown him a small, human kindness. His third act was to formalize the very thing that had allowed him to solve the crisis. He created a permanent, well-funded digital archaeology unit, a team whose sole job was to sift through the sewer water of the network, the low-level logs, and the junk data, searching for the quiet, hidden whispers of the next great threat. One evening, a month after the crisis, Catherine Finch found Leo in his new office, not staring at a wall of data, but at a framed diploma on his wall. It was his bachelor's degree in computer science. The university sent it over, he said with a quiet, proud smile. Aegis made a donation to their endowment fund, and to a certain medical fund for a man who had a stroke. The dean said my independent field research counted as my final semester credits. Aegis owed you a debt, Catherine said, standing beside him. And we always pay our debts. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two unlikely allies who had forged a partnership in the crucible of a crisis. You know, Catherine said finally, the board was nervous. Promoting an intern with no degree to a director-level position. It was unprecedented, but the results speak for themselves. The watermark protocol has already been sold to 3 of our other major clients. It's on its way to becoming the new industry standard. Your first act as an intern is going to make this company hundreds of millions. Leo looked out at the glittering lights of the city. He thought of his father, now in the best rehabilitation facility in the state, his recovery slow but steady. He thought of the quiet, desperate nights he had spent, terrified that his one shot at a future was slipping away. I was just doing my job, he said quietly. No, Catherine corrected him. You did more than your job. You reminded a company full of very smart, very powerful people of a very simple truth, that sometimes the most important voices are the ones no one is listening to, and the greatest threats are the ones hiding in plain sight. Leo smiled. He was no longer a ghost in the machine. He was its guardian.